Welcome to this Asset Wisdom interview with Andy Watts, MD of the Institute of Asset Management. Andy will be sharing his thoughts and the work of the IAM as the impact of COVID becomes clearer. Each week we will be talking to other professionals who have agreed to share their thoughts on the new world we are all now working in. Good morning, Andy. Thank you very much for agreeing to have this conversation this morning. Opportune time, I think. Just for people that are listening, a little bit of background about myself. I'm Managing Director of Asset Wisdom Limited. We are a provider of online learning and work very much through a reseller network. In terms of background, I'm a nurse by background and a health service manager, so I don't claim to be an asset manager, but I've learned a lot through the process of being involved with asset management. I wonder, Andy, it would be good if you could just sort of give a bit of a background to yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, June. So I'm Andy Watts. I trained as an engineer originally and had 17 years in industry. Not that I knew it, but effectively managing assets and getting into the world of asset management. Working predominantly in utilities, electricity distribution, and then high pressure gas transmission for a private gas company. And after 17 years in the sector, I then turned to consulting and had about 16, 17 years actually consulting back into those sectors, predominantly around asset management. And then set up on my own about 3 years ago to offer advice and guidance to organisations wanting to improve and develop their asset management capabilities. I've been involved with the IAM, which is where I'm currently working as the Managing Director, really since the turn of the century, when PAS 55 was originally written. Was a part of the team that started that process of the IAM developing PAS 55, the competency framework, the self-assessment methodologies, and have been volunteering with the IAM for a long, long time.
You took your post fairly recently, or your current post fairly recently, and I'm sure you had great aspirations and plans to continue the work that had already been moving forward at quite a pace, and then along came COVID-19, which I'm sure was a challenge and has had to make you really rethink what you are planning to do. So it'd be really good to hear what your thoughts are in terms of where you are now and what you're planning to do.
Yeah, I mean it has. It was literally weeks before the lockdown actually came formally into play that I took on the role with the IAM to follow Kirsten's work. And yes, you're quite right. I mean, everybody comes into a role like that with some ideas of how to progress what we'd started. There's a lot of big projects going on, and then we were thrown into a very different situation with the lockdown. And I think, I mean, the impact that's had really on us as a professional institution is having to rethink how we engage with our membership. We often talk about ourselves as being an online or a virtual organisation, because we don't operate face to face with all our members. There's members all over the world, not just sort of here locally where we're based. So you do have to think very differently and think, how can we reach out to people in times when you can't organise face to face either local branch events or chapter events or even our main conferences. So it's a very different way of trying to reach people and help them continue to do what the IAM does, which is develop the profession and develop the individuals in the profession. And obviously, managing ourselves, the organisation, through the time when we've had to cancel major conferences that were planned for the summer, which has had a big impact on the institution, as well as missing out on that ability to bring people together. And do what we do best, which is help people share and develop knowledge and best practice around the profession.
Yeah, it's definitely brought many challenges for individuals and for organisations as well. And I think some organisations are really going to face some challenges going forward in terms of how they manage their assets and how they are able to build back up to where they were and the sort of great changes that have taken place previously. So I think it'd be interesting to hear what you feel about organisations and what they need to they need to be doing, what their challenges are going to be going forward.
You know, during this period of lockdown, asset management really does come into its own as far as, you know, the attention, the focus that people have to put on, particularly with keeping the essential services running. You know, whilst lockdown has had the impact of keeping people at home, our key workers are still out there, and the approach that they need to take, those working in the sectors that look after assets, is becoming very, very different. So, I mean, good asset management is all about delivering value and delivering services and products from assets that add value, both, you know, back to the organisation, but also to the public and the social environments at large. And so for society, the people that are using the output from these assets that people are managing, it's now more important than ever that the essential services and the infrastructures that are running those are reliable, are performing well, and allow people to do what they do. So, you know, health services, the equipment, the buildings, the distribution networks, the critical transport links, vehicles that support those logistics, and of course the technology, the communications sector has really come into its own. So all those sectors, all those industries are having to focus very differently on how they maintain all those services, whilst not really having that ability just to flood their assets with people doing what they normally do, maintaining, operating, looking after them. So I think where asset management as a discipline can really play a big part in that, is helping people focus, which is good practice in the world of asset management anyway, on the more critical assets, the ones that really deliver those services and have an impact on ensuring that they perform well. And if they are failing or do fail, then people understanding how that happens, what are the telltale signs that people will look for, that they can say, we now need to react to this and do something about it.
And I'd be quite interested to know, asset management is not just about engineers, which it's still seen by many people as an engineering issue, but it's a whole organisational issue. Do you see the time when there are going to be a lot more involvement from an understanding by HR professionals, by finance professionals, etc.?
You're quite right. You know, the breadth of asset management is something that a lot of organisations are still starting to get to grips with. You know, as I said at the beginning, I was an engineer by background, so I naturally sort of grew up into roles through my career that were very much centre of the physical and planning and strategic side of asset management. But it's very much about the organisation. You know, organisations are asset management based organisations. It's not a function within an organisation. It's much broader than that. And so it is all about bringing the people together, bringing the skills together, bringing the technologies together, the supply chain, and looking right across the breadth of the organisation to break those sort of silos down and say, yeah, look, we are an asset management organisation. We're developing very long-term views of how to deliver this. And that spans, you know, all those roles that we've been talking about. It's not just about the engineering. So you know, one of the things the IAM is very keen to do is to spread that message and ensure that, you know, everybody across the breadth of an organisation has some basic sort of understanding of what asset management is about and what it means to organisations that operate in that space. And there's a number of things that we do. I mean, we have a series of qualifications for people at the heart of the profession, but in addition to that, we have a service product called the Foundation Award, which is what it says. It builds a foundation of asset management understanding. It builds a common language that whether people are working within accountancy, within the finance areas, within HR, or the procurement, logistics, supply chain within organisations, as well as, you know, the centre of that operational and engineering base, then they can get this sort of view of asset management and produce or have a common language, a common understanding of some of the key sort of terms and expressions that people use, like life cycle and total cost and totex. So rather than it be a unique silo within an organisation, It's much wider than that. So that's one of the ways that we can help organisations at a broad and basic level develop the capability of the people within their organisation through this sort of common language, common understanding of asset management.
I think the other thing about the foundational world as you described it, I just see that's potentially also a launch pad or an exploration that people that think they might want to go into asset management as a profession, it's their sort of little toe in the water exercise that they can see, is that where I want to go? So I think that's a really useful step forward, really, and part of building the profession. It
is. I mean, we have a great network, as I say, of endorsed training providers, and some of them have some online offerings, not all do, and we're encouraging them to do more in that space. But one of the things that we're very conscious of is that the main population centres are fairly well served, but in the more remote parts of the world, it's not always possible. We get people ringing us up saying, how can I attend training? How can I do your exams and certain qualifications when I'm in an area where it's many hundreds of miles to the nearest opportunity to do that. We do have a network of exam centres through a partner around the globe, many thousands of them, but again, they're not everywhere. So online training plays into the development side of people, people who are building their own capabilities. But then specific qualifications, in the middle of June, one of the things we're doing, and again, this is, it was in a longer term plan, but it's something we've brought forward because of the lockdown, is that we're adding to our exam platform to have a product called OnView, where you can sit one of our certificates or diploma exams, again, at home on your own laptop. So these sort of actions, I think, are things that have made us think more short term about how we become more of a virtual organisation. Sort of adopted a phrase of pivoting the IAM to move it from it very much sort of focused on bringing people together face to face to improving the virtual offerings and online offerings that we have, both in meetings, for forums, for discussions. And starting to get into the world of online workshops and webinars. And we're also looking at our conferences that we've postponed from the summer to later in the year now, and saying, in November, we don't know what the situation will be. So how do we build a hybrid event where if people can travel and they can safely come to a venue, we can run the conference that way, but equally, how do we create something that people can access from the safety of their own homes if we're still in that situation, which I think we will be. So we'll be looking at hybrid or online only events, as many organisations are doing. And they bring their own challenges. It's a different way of thinking, a different way of presenting the information that you would normally see and gather at a conference. And it does meet, I think, some of the objectives of running conferences, but not all of them. What we've found in the past is that many of the delegates that come to our conferences around the world, they both want to share their learning, pick up new learning and insights into the profession, but also meet people. And the networking opportunity from running a big conference, bringing 200, 300, 400 people together, is a big part of why people come to our events and other conferences. So that's something that's harder to do virtually. There are ways and means, and we're at the moment just looking at different platforms for having the ability to have working groups within a conference environment online, as well as just sort of single one-to-many presentations. So certainly a lot of new and different ways of achieving what we want to achieve as an institute and develop the profession and the individuals within it. So I think that's a really exciting move, and I think the other point you made, which I think is absolutely right, that online learning is a really valuable tool in the bag of what's provided in terms of education of any kind. But there is always a space for face-to-face learning, for networking, for all of the other things that you mentioned, where people can actually exchange their views. Andy and I hope you enjoyed the first interview. He will, in our next call, be sharing his thoughts on professional development and the role the IAM has in supporting its members as they move along their career journey.